Hi everybody, Kevin McNamara here and welcome to the Inspired Healing Podcast. And today my special guest is Donna Moulds. She has over 15 years experience in the vocational education and training industry. She has trained thousands of students over the years. She's also an amazing mother, grandmother. Her life has had loads of ups and downs, but she's always come through. She runs a couple of podcasts. One of them is the Resilience Movement podcast, which I've had the pleasure of being on myself. She's a very resilient lady, really inspiring. And today we're going to talk about her experience last year on her 50th birthday, walking the Camino De Santiago. She walked over 1,000 kilometres in 33 days. We're going to talk about the highs, the lows, and just the magical experience that is walking the Camino. So without further ado, here's me and Donna Moulds. Hey there, Donna. Great to have you on the Inspired Healing Podcast. Thanks for coming along today. Really appreciate that.
I'm glad to be a guest. It's awesome. Thank you.
Beautiful. Now, we're going to talk today about your amazing Camino adventure from last year. But first of all, what I would like to hear about is what our viewers would, or our listeners would like to hear about is a little bit about where you're from, where you were born, your family, that kind of thing. Can you just give us a bit of background there?
Goodness, we'll be here all day. No, so I was born in Nowra, New South Wales, where my family, my mother and father and my two brothers, I have an older brother and a younger brother, they still reside there in Nowra, and I visit often. And I myself have 4 children, and I have now got 9 grandchildren. And our family was always quite large. In fact, my youngest daughter was the 21st great-grandchild to my grandparents. So we have a large extended family, which is awesome. And when my grandparents were alive, we were always together as cousins and aunties and uncles and everything. So I grew up with very strong family values. I'm now residing in Carwoola, which is actually on a property 280 acres out of town, but just out of town, like 14 kilometres out of Queanbeyan, a little bit further out of Canberra, and just I think 12 kilometres out of Bungendore. So people will kind of know that it's out a bit rural, because I work from home. So it's nice and peaceful and just beautiful. Out every window of my house has a view of something beautiful.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Yeah. And sort of growing up, what kind of work did your dad do? And what was it like being in a family and that's sort of country, isn't it, Nowra? Sort of in the country.
Like it's 2 hours down from Sydney, so it's kind of the smaller knit town. So Mum worked at the hospital for a while, and she was in the kitchen area of the hospital. And my father he was going to be a football player, first grade football player, but he actually had a car accident when he was 18, which kind of destroyed any boxing career that he had and football career that he had. And so for a long while there, he was the dad at home, especially with my younger brother. So when my younger brother was a baby, that's when Mum went to work. Before that, he had worked at a place called John Bull. And in fact, my grandfather, his father, was the last blacksmith in they lived in Bomaderry, which is right next to Nowra, and he was the last blacksmith around, and he worked at the same place called Ingram's. So, you talk about the generations now. My grandfather worked at the same place from the time he started work until the time he retired. And I don't think he ever had a day off sick, so right. Very, very different. And later on in life, when we were actually adults, my mum and dad were both taxi drivers in their town, which was really weird because they absolutely loved it.
Right. Yeah, well, I guess like a fairly small town, I guess a lot of the people there and you'd feel safe, I would imagine, whereas working somewhere like, in Melbourne or Sydney or somewhere as a taxi driver wouldn't be a lot of fun, I wouldn't think.
No, and look, they had their moments, and especially when I remember before my dad retired, there was the taxi driver who was actually his taxi was burnt. He was murdered in Nowra and
Yeah.
burnt, and that was kind of really out there for Nowra. You heard about that in the bigger cities, but not in Nowra. So we started to get concerned because mum and dad were in their late 60s. They were in their mid 60s actually, and they were just looking at retirement. So, but
Yeah.
really really loved it. But mum and dad actually, when they drove taxis, they alternated on shifts because they were actually raising their young granddaughter. And my mum and dad raised her from the time she was 3 because my younger brother wasn't able to raise her, and she's now 17. So
Gee.
they had to
Wow.
raise a girl twice,
Yeah.
and I wasn't the best teenager.
Right. Okay. I see. So, what was your first job when you left school?
Daryl Lee Chocolates.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Beautiful.
but I actually left home quite young. So I moved out of home before I was 15 and started working. And it was just the dynamics in the household at that time. And let me just premise that with, I have a beautiful relationship with my mum and dad. Um, when I was trekking Kokoda, I actually made a commitment to myself that I would be the best daughter for the rest of their lives, because I'd been a pretty crap daughter in my teenage years.
Right. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. Absolutely. And how did
Yeah.
you get into? I know you've been in the training industry for a number of years. How did that all come about?
Wow, that's a really interesting story because I was going through a terrible divorce in the Northern Territory. At the time, I lived in Darwin, so went from Nowra to Darwin and spent 10 years there. And my marriage broke down, and I actually had my 4th child was a miracle child. She was the product she was conceived after my husband had a vasectomy. So you
Oh,
can
wow.
imagine gossip in a small community. But so she was conceived, and she is just such a unique girl. She's just gorgeous, and nothing troubles her in the world. Um, and so when I was going through this time, a friend of mine, she was a mentor of mine actually, and introduced me to NLP, Neuro-Linguistic
Yep.
Programming. And Dale was really helping me, I guess, find myself in a really bad place. She was helping me rediscover a different way of life, and and I can tell you a funny story about my introduction to NLP because it's quite significant. But so as I started to really gain my own power back to be able to get out of a pretty bad marriage, um, she said to me one day, "Hey, do you want to teach people how to use computers? These people are long-term unemployed, they're Indigenous, or they have disabilities." And I went, "Sure." I just had that attitude that I could do anything. And so the night before, I would be teaching what I had to teach, which was just the basics of using the computer, navigating Word, and then searching on the internet. And I would learn what I had to learn the night before because I really didn't know how to use a computer. But I had children to feed. I had to put a roof over their head, and it was a pretty dire situation at that time. So I actually went in and ran what was called the BITES course, Basic IT Enabling Skills, at a small company in the Northern Territory. And they loved me. I loved doing that. And it kind of went from there. It was part-time. And then they asked me, and keep in mind, I'm struggling to survive. I
Mm.
had no money. I wasn't getting, any child support at that time, and they pulled me into the office and said, "Hey, you're really good at this," because I was just good with people. That was just who I am.
Yep.
And they said, "We'd like you to do traineeships." And I had no idea what that meant, but I'm like, "Sure." And they said, "Because you'll be casual, we can only pay you $69.95 an hour. Would that be okay?" And of course, inside I'm going, "Oh my God." yeah, sure, I think that'll be okay. And yeah, and then that continued, and I started to earn some really good money at that time. And then that company was bought out by Charles Darwin University. And I thought that I would just lose my job. I just thought, well, they've been bought out, there's no need. Well, instead, I got transferred over to the IT department with academics in Charles Darwin University. This girl didn't finish year 9 of high school.
Right.
So I'm going like, oh my God, I felt so like a duck out of water, like I just had no clue what I was doing. But they were the most remarkable people who took me under their wing and just showed me what to do. And in fact, I ended up running the program there with traineeships, doing it a different way, where I would go to the workplace, not the students come to us. And that was very unique to the university. And also my Bites course was booked out 2 months in advance with all these people because we had government funding. So anyone who was on a CIDP payment, I think it was, but had to do some kind of training. And my program ended up producing something like $690,000 for the university. And
Wow.
so I was like, I was in pretty
Golden
good stead
child.
with the head. And any time I asked for a pay rise, like the first time I said, you know, I think I should be paid more because I got employed, I had to put in a business case. I had no idea what a business case was. And of course, these people in IT helped me. You know, I'll never forget, you know, Jeff and Ferdy and a few others who just really helped me out. And every business case I put on in, I got the pay rise, you know, a $5,000 pay rise. And then I had this desire to run my own RTO because Charles Darwin University was an RTO. And so I ended up, you know, a couple of years have passed and I've met someone and we got married and we moved to Canberra to start our own RTO.
Okay. Wow.
And that in itself came with a lot of tumultuous things.
Well, that's an amazing story. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like it all just flowed happily along with you, and the universe just looked after you, basically.
Yeah, and I never understood that until Canberra, until work that I've been doing and understanding that. But I have always known somewhere that I am okay. I'm always going to be okay.
Yeah.
But in the chaos back then, it didn't feel like that. Yeah. It was
for sure.
like fight and flight, day in, day out for a very long time.
Yeah. And you're still running your own business now?
Well, yeah. So for 12 years, I ran an RTO, and interesting story there is we set up our own RTO and we spent 8 months putting everything together, finding the right office, finding the right location, which was in a great place called Gungahlin. And I had, I think we did a grand opening, and we had a senator come and do the grand opening, and he brought along Win News, which was fantastic. And I just thought all our dreams were coming true. But 9 weeks after we opened, my husband packed his car up and drove to Tasmania.
Right.
With about 30 minutes notice.
Oh, God.
And yeah, and so here I am with this business. We're not yet an RTO. We were finding our way, but we had purchased everything in the business. You know, like the infrastructure was incredible with the computers and everything was set up. But turned out it wasn't his dream. And so,
Okay. So
there I was with
in the road.
Yeah, and keep in mind throughout all of this time, you know, of running my business, moving from Darwin to Canberra at that time, you just kind of think that life's just coming together, and then a curveball happens, and so throughout from 2007 to 2018, you know, I had a son going through ice addiction, and my husband had gone to Tasmania, and I was like, how am I going to do this on my own? The business was not set up to do on my own at all.
Yeah.
But I did it for 12 years. And actually, I'm not sure how I did it for 12 years, but I did. So
Wow.
last year, last year in January, I actually decided to stop being an RTO. I was so burnt out, and I'd had enough of the bureaucracy, the compliance, and and we'd done really well. We'd really contributed to people's lives for, a long time, and helped people get educated and get qualifications. And we had long-standing clients that had used our services and been very loyal, and we looked after them. But I have to say, when you make a decision and people don't like your decision, yeah, people don't hang around, do they?
No, that's very true. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you just kept plugging away, and so what? After 2018, did you close it down?
Well, this was all really building up 2018, and then by January 2019, I partnered with an organisation who, sometimes I'm very trusting, and I trusted the wrong people, and pretty much by March, April, I had lost everything. So I had lost every ounce of income. I had lost credibility. People were told things that they believed instead of asking me. And I had to get my ego in check and close things down. There's a lot of negotiating to do with getting a business of 12 years, shut down. And I really lost my way. And it was funny because I had actually planned to walk the Camino 2 years prior, but my mother got sick with cancer, bowel cancer. And so we just did what we had to do. We took care of Mum, and Dad got a little bit sick at that time as well. So when all that happened, I had already planned to walk the Camino. And so by the 29th of May, I was basically getting on a bus to get on a plane to go and walk across Spain. And I have to say, it probably saved my life.
Yeah, right.
People might laugh.
No, not at all. That's amazing. And the first half of your story is amazing anyway, and very inspiring. And we haven't even touched the Camino yet, so that's
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now, so last year, 2019, you walked the Camino. For those people who don't know what the Camino is, can you just explain what that is and what it involves?
Yeah, so the Camino is a spiritual walk. People do it for religious reasons. People do it for health reasons. I did it for spiritual reasons, and pretty much to save my own life, my sanity. I was in a really, really dark place. And I'll just step back a second. So all through my career, I've always done things that push me harder. So in 2007, I did the fire walk with Anthony Robbins, and that sustained me for a while, because it's like, if I can do this, I can do anything, And so that gave me momentum. And then in 2012, I trekked Kokoda, and that was 98 kilometres, but extremely hard. Like it was really hard. And whilst I was walking Kokoda, my son had relapsed. We'd had him in rehab, he'd relapsed. So mentally, I wasn't in a great place. And I remember walking up the first mountain and saying, either you're gonna stop this thinking, or you're gonna fail, and you'll be airlifted out. So snap out of it, girl, which was pretty, you drink some cement or whatever it took. So then fast forward to 2019, I knew I needed to do something that was going to either pull me out of a funk, or I may as well just give up on life, because my business really defined me. I wasn't Donna, I was Mantra Training and Development. I didn't know who Donna was. I'd lost sight of that.
Yep.
And so for me, it was a spiritual walk, and it's 860 kilometres. It's actually more than that, but 860 kilometres across Spain. And I started at a place called Saint-Jean Pierre de Port. And you walk across through amazing villages and you end up at Santiago de Compostela, or Finisterre, which is the end of the earth. I didn't get to Finisterre, but I will in my lifetime. And you just walk, and many people have walked part of it and then come back another year and walk another part. I'm not that kind of girl. I'm just like, you're all in or you're not. And so you actually get a certificate which says you walk 797 kilometres, and that really left a bad taste in my mouth, because I actually counted my steps every day. And so you walked over 1 million steps, and you walked over 1,000 kilometres in total by the time you go through each village. So and anyone who wants to have a little bit of an idea of what it is, watch the movie with Martin Sheen called The Way, and that will give you an idea.
Great movie, absolutely. Is that where you first heard of the Camino? Did you watch that movie, or had you heard of it before that?
No, well, someone told me to watch that movie because I was looking for something. I wasn't going to go to base camp. I wasn't going to go Kilimanjaro, but I needed something. And keep in mind, this was 2 years prior that I actually made or 3 years prior that I actually made the decision that that's what I was going to do. And once I make up my mind for something, then I'm like a dog with a bone. It's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, myself and Joy, we walked the Camino, but we spent about 12 days walking it from Sarria to Santiago de Compostela. And it was one of the best experiences of our life. And we only did a small little part of it. And it's just an amazing thing to do. There's no doubt about that. So what was your motivation to go and do the Camino?
My motivation was I needed to, it was almost like I needed to stop my life. I needed to stop the roller coaster. I needed to get some perspective. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like, I really felt like my life was over. Like I can't, other than to say, my family was very worried about me. They, God, I'm going to get choked up. They were, checking in and making sure I was okay all the time. And I really wasn't coping with what had happened, especially when I worked so hard to build this reputation up. And it was almost like this reputation was dragged out from under me in what seemed like a minute. And I took it so personally, and I had to really fall back on some of my training, because I've done a lot of mindset training, a lot of NLP training, and I had some amazing people around me who were keeping perspective for me till I could get there. And there were times where I had to go, all right, Donna, get logical. And I remember someone doing something really unethical, and I went to them and I said, you know what? I have proof that you have been unethical, and I'm going to share this proof if you tell one more lie about me, and don't test that, because I will do it. And I had to do it many times. People would say things. And it's interesting how, it'd be like someone saying something to me about you, Kev, and me just believing it without even asking you. And I knew some of these people who were believing it. I hadn't known them for years. And there was people who had evidence, because there was some really unethical stuff happening with people who work in government departments in Canberra, who were threatening people not to work with me. And for me, I'm going, oh my God, if I was a bad person, I could understand this, but I'm not. And so to reconcile all of this was just pushing me beyond a place I've ever been. So, and I've been divorced a couple of times, and this was just beyond what I could understand about human nature. And obviously, now I'm a little bit more schooled in that. And I, again, as I'm walking the Camino, I call it, I walked all the shit off.
Yeah.
I really, really did walk it off. And, there was probably 3 days in the whole 33 days, I only cried 3 days. So I thought that was pretty good.
Not bad, yeah. So, so you've landed in. Where did you land when you arrived in Spain? Did you go straight
So
to the Camino?
I actually, no, I flew into Paris. I let me just say, I'm navigationally challenged at the best of times. So I didn't plan this very well, and I'm a good planner, but I flew into Paris. And so what I had to do is go from Canberra via bus to Sydney, Sydney to Abu Dhabi, Abu Dhabi to Paris. I then I was so grateful. I sat on a plane next to these two guys who had travelled a lot, and they told me about jet lag and how you get around jet lag. And I went, and I followed their instructions, and that was really, really great. And then once I got to Paris, I obviously had a bit of a sleep. The next day I got up and I walked to the Eiffel Tower and FaceTimed my mum and dad so they could see the Eiffel Tower. And then I had to get trains all the way from Paris past Bordeaux, Bayonne, and down to Saint-Jean. And that's where I had booked accommodation. And the lady was so beautiful. She came and picked me up from the train at 10 o'clock at night and took me straight to the registration desk where I could register and get my shell, get my credentials. And when we say credentials, those of you who are watching a video, you'll see you get a passport. Kind of can't see it, with your credentials, and you get stamps and and so she took me. So then I think it was about 11 o'clock I got to bed, and was like Christmas Eve. I woke up really early and was raring to go. And and that was my 50th birthday. So the day I woke up in Saint-Jean was my 50th birthday, and so that's what I had planned. Is I'm going to start my 50th year with a bang.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you woke up, you're in Saint-Jean, and you're about to walk the Camino. What were you feeling at that stage? You're walking out the door, you're about to start this 33-day trek, this amazing journey that thousands of people have done over many, many years. What was going on in your mind at that stage?
I was like a little girl on Christmas Day. It was so surreal that I was like, I've got my map out and I've got my backpack on and I'm all set up ready to go, and I've got my water, and I just had butterflies like you wouldn't believe. And I remember walking and I found the first Camino shell on a wall with the arrow. And I just went like, because I'm navigationally challenged, I'm like, oh, I'm on the right path. I was so excited. And I remember FaceTiming my sister-in-law, Karen, and like, can you believe where I am? Like, can you believe? And she's like, I can't, so I had that excitement. My family was amazing along my journey. They were there every step of the way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Jeez. And so you're walking along at your first day. Was it a nice day? Was it sunny, and was it cold, or?
It was, it was crisp. The air was so crisp and clean, and it was very foggy. So in the distance you saw lots of fog, and and there was only like one or two people around, because Spain is a really sleepy town, a sleepy place in the mornings. No one's really morning people. And so you could only see trekkers out and a few of the locals. And it's what's interesting, even from day one, if I had this look on my face, which I don't even think I could duplicate if I tried, someone would always say that way or that way. They would just see this look of, which way am I supposed to go? And they would point, because you've got your shell on your bag, and they know that you're a pilgrim.
Yep.
And you are treated, I don't know if you found this, Kevin, but you are treated so welcoming and so warm by everyone.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It was just, like I remember our first day, we walked out of this little pension and out onto the street there in Sarria, and there's people walking past who obviously have done the whole Camino. We're just doing a little bit. And it was just such a surreal feeling, just thinking, wow, I'm here, and oh look, there's a shell. We're actually doing it. It was just, and we're the same as you. We watched The Way with Martin Sheen. That's what got us into wanting to do it, and just that thrill of just being out there and just seeing these people walking past, thinking, wow, we're doing it. We're walking the path that all these, people have done for, I don't know how many years, but hundreds of years, and you're part of it. And it is very much a surreal feeling. And and along with that, I guess doing 33 days, there would have been days where you struggled, and you may have found it a bit hard at times. What were there times where you were thinking, why am I doing this? My feet are killing me, blah, blah, blah. And what kept you going in those times?
So I can honestly say I never had a time where I went, why am I doing this? Because I just knew why I was doing it, and I knew I needed to do it. And day one was explained to me as the walk of fire. And I kind of didn't know what that meant. I went, I've walked along fire. What are you talking about? But your first day, you went from Saint-Jean to Roncesvalles. And that was, and I will never forget, that was 55,000 steps. It was 32 kilometres and the book said 25. I don't know what the hell happened. I didn't get lost, but I did 32 kilometres. And I will tell you that there were moments. I'll give you this one example. So as I'm walking, and you're just going up and up and up and up. And when you think you are at the top, you then walk a little bit further and you realise you're not. And, there was some WTF moments where I went, I just and people would see you and go, are you okay? Are you okay? So there was always that caring. And I remember this one time before, like I'm still going up and I'm going, how far up can we go? And I was spent. I was exhausted. And this was like late in the afternoon. This was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which I thought I'd be finished by then. And I remember laying down, and I was laying on rocks. I didn't care. I was right next to the road. I actually didn't care if I found a grass place or whatever. I laid there. And I remember laying there, and there's a photo that I took where you can see that I am spent and there's nothing left.
How inspiring is Donna Moulds? Thanks for tuning in to listen to part 1 of her amazing Camino journey. Don't forget to check back in tomorrow's episode, for part 2 of Donna Moulds and her amazing Camino journey. Talk to you then.